Class.
Phil Buffers. Okay, thank you. Okay, item 2 then. Do we have any declarations of interest? No? No.
No.
Okay, moving on then. Item 3 then, the minutes of the previous meeting. There's one minor item at the end, minute number 19, part B. There's a slight error saying that the risk management report for Q1 was going to go to this meeting when we in fact dealt with it at the last meeting. But other than that, I'm not aware of anything. Does anybody else have any comments on those minutes?
No, I'm okay.
No? Yep. Thank you. Right. Okay then. Item number 4 then, the internal audit annual report for 2019-20, and Claire's just going to run through that for us. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the internal audit annual report for looking backwards over the last financial year. I think the committee knows we bring this report every year. Just drawing your attention to paragraph 1.3 at the bottom of the first page. Just to point out that this report was produced on the basis of internal staff, 2 internal auditors undertaking the internal audit work, and 1 corporate fraud officer, and myself providing the overview support for the service. And at paragraph 1.5, just to mention also that we also contracted out the IT audit work to a specialist company, which was for the previous financial year was Information Security Advice Limited. So just a bit of background information. So if I can draw your attention to the main appendix, which has got the report itself in. I'm on page 15 of your pack. So just drawing your attention to paragraph 2.4 there. So the main purpose of this report is to bring an annual opinion. So drawing on all the work that we've done throughout the year to bring an annual opinion forward that will then form part of the annual governance statement, which forms part of the statement of accounts. And at paragraph 2.4 there, it says the conclusion we're drawing this year is that with the internal control environment is well controlled. So that's obviously a positive opinion for the year. Most important thing I think to point out first of all. Just over the page on page 16, just highlighting the significant issue. So we had 2 reports in the year which had negative opinions, and they were absence management and recycling. Both those audits had less than adequate opinions, and obviously we're continuing to monitor to make sure the recommendations in those areas are implemented to improve on those weaknesses. So in section 3, just some details of the work that was undertaken during the year. So the original plan had 33 audits on it. 6 of those were IT audits. And you've got some details on the bullet points there of the kind of things that we were looking at during those audits. Paragraph 3.2, just some details of the audits that were completed. So 15 of the regular audits were completed. Obviously, we've got the 6 IT ones as well, were completed during the year. And at table 1, you've got the opinions of those audits. So as you can see, over 86% had positive opinions. So obviously, really positive picture to present there. And you just got the details over the page at table 2 on what those definitions mean. So paragraph 3.3. So of the audits that we conducted during the year, we came up with 58 recommendations from those 15 audits. And as you can see in table 3 there, you've got a breakdown of the recommendation, the levels of the recommendations that were made. So no high level recommendations were made in a year, again, really positive. And we had 40 medium recommendations and 18 low. So at the top of the next page, so on page 18, just to highlight there, well, obviously we also track those recommendations to make sure that they're implemented, because obviously that's the most important thing when we undertake a piece of audit work, that those recommendations are actually implemented. So at this stage, we have 65%. Sorry, I should say these levels were at the point at the end of March. So the position has improved slightly on this, but as at the end of March, this was the position, which is the cut-off point when the report was produced. So 38 of the recommendations had been implemented, and at that stage 20 hadn't. As it says in paragraph 3.5 there, we will continue to monitor to make sure those recommendations are implemented. And as I said, we've had a big push, and actually the position is better than that, which I can talk to about when we talk about Q1, which is the next agenda item. So at paragraph 3.6, just some details of those IT audits. As I said, they were undertaken by Information Security Advice Limited, so a separate company. And actually 4 of those audits were completed in the year, and they all had opinions of reasonable assurance. So as you can see in table 4 there, you've got the opinions there. And at paragraph 3.7, you've got the recommendations that were made as part of those IT audits. So there were 3 high, 6 medium and 8 low. So over the page, on page 19, just a bit of detail about performance against the audit plan. So table 6 is a summary, provides a summary of the position at the end of the year. So 19 audits were completed, and at the end of the year 2 were still in progress. We have deferred 9 audits, so giving us a total of 30, and then 3 have been identified as no longer required. So at paragraph 4.2, just got some detail there of those deferred audits. I think you may remember that during Q2 and Q3, the committee agreed to the request to defer some audits. And the main reason for this is because the internal audit team were actually involved in some special investigations at the time, and that was felt that was a priority over some of the planned audit work. So you've just got a list there of the audits that were deferred. And then during Q4, we also identified that the elections audit would need to be deferred just because there wasn't enough time to get that audit underway during the year. So over the page, sorry, the heading slipped through there. So fraud and irregularity. Just to say that, obviously part of the work that the internal audit team undertake is to make sure that we identify any control weaknesses that could lead to fraud, working closely with the fraud officer. And at paragraph 5.3, sorry, it says there, no allegations were received through the council's confidential reporting procedure in the year. Section 6 then, just to explain a bit about internal audit and the standards that we abide by. So we abide by something called the Public Sector Internal Audit Standards. So just to provide you with assurance that we were following those standards during the year. Paragraph 6.2 states, we have an external assessment process that we need to undertake every 5 years, and that was last done for the council in January 2017. Just moving on to section 8 then, so over the page on page 21. I think I was already aware of this, but just to point out that from the 1st of April, the full internal audit service moved to Stoke-on-Trent City Council, so we're providing a full internal audit service from the 1st of April. And it also, as part of that, we aim to provide all the IT audit needs as well. Paragraph 8.2. I think, again, we've discussed previously that Newcastle is working with Stoke as part of our Staffordshire Counter Fraud partnership. And as part of that partnership, we're rolling out some fraud awareness e-learning to everyone within the council. So that's hopefully we can get that underway during this year. So in the appendices then, on page 22, you've got a list of all the audits that were undertaken during the year together with their opinions. And you also got those for the IT audits that were undertaken during the year. And over the page on page 24, table 8 there just highlights the 2 audits that were still in progress at the end of the year. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Does anybody have any questions? Mike?
Just a very quick one, Claire. The 26% of the audits that haven't been done, when are you looking to do them? Are they down to be done this year?
Yeah, the vast majority, so again, what we've done is we've put those into this year's audit plan and done a revised risk assessment. And yes, the vast majority of those are on the current plan. Just trying to find the page just to quickly check. Yeah, so Jubilee 2 is on the plan, is on the plan for this year, as was major projects. GDPR is as well. And most of the IT ones, and we've got Brexit on there as well, haven't we?
I mean, through the chair, obviously. Sorry, Paul. I mean, you've reeled off some real meaty projects there. What my concern is that they're going to get pushed back another year and another year. I mean, Jubilee 2 is going to grow into a huge audit. I've got no doubt about that at all. GDPR is obviously a really important one as well. I suppose it's a request rather than anything else, but can we make sure that they're looked at sooner rather than later? I would understand if the Jubilee 2 was put back, because I think that's going to turn into a monstrous audit with what's going on up there at the moment. But I think the rest really need to be looked at sooner rather than later, if that's possible.
Okay, I mean, I've got the Q1 report to talk about next, so perhaps pick it up as part of that discussion about where we are with the current year. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. You know, where we do defer an audit, we obviously need to make sure that, you know, where we've risk assessed that it is still an area of concern, that we need to do that piece of work sooner rather than later. And one of the things we do when we do that risk assessment is think about when we've last done the piece of work as well. So if it's an area of concern and we haven't done an audit for a number of years, then clearly that one will get priority ahead of a piece of work that we've done the previous year. So yeah, part of the risk assessment is to say how long is it since we've last done a piece of work and provided that assurance.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay. Claire, can I just ask you a more general question? Obviously, all of your staff must be being disrupted at the moment, and obviously the access to the people who are the subject or whose departments are subject to the audits, it must be very disruptive. How is everybody coping generally? I'm not looking for specifics. I just wondered generally.
Yeah, obviously it's a massive change for us as an internal audit team, because we're used to, you know, talking to people face to face. You know, we're used to going through processes and procedures together with people. We're used to observing processes. Obviously, it's a big change for us, you know, not to be able to do that. And you know, but I think technology is a wonderful thing, isn't it? So we've been able to we utilise Teams quite a lot, and also the team have been doing some training and support. You know, the CIPRA, the public sector body that looks after accountancy, have put some really good seminars on around how to audit in this kind of environment. So that's been really useful as well. So yeah, it's been a big change for us. But you know, I think the team are embracing the change. I think we've got another area of concern is, you know, getting hold of people as well, because everybody else is busy as well, aren't they, with, you know, responding to the pandemic as well. So you know, just getting hold of people and then being able to prioritise internal audit, you know, work is another area of concern. But yeah, at the minute the team are doing well, thank you for asking. And I have to say they are getting used to working in a different way. So yeah.
I just thought, I mean, obviously when you're remote, I mean, there's nothing like just being able to sit in somebody's office until they do something, and you can't really do that over the phone or
yeah, exactly. I think you know, it is a massive change for them. They are all embracing that change. And as I said, you know, we have undertaken some training sessions, just, you know, in terms of how to approach audits in that different way. And it has meant, you know, we've adapted the way that we work to respond to that. So yeah, we're a few months in now, aren't we? So yeah, they're finding their feet.
Yeah, I'm glad you're getting some training from CIPRA and what have you as well.
Yeah, thank you.
If it's not, if this COVID thing and working from home is not upsetting things too much, all the better, really, isn't it, if it's working all right?
Yeah. Right, do we have any other questions then before we move on? No? All right, well, thank you for that, Claire. You're up again for number 5.
This is me as well.
Yeah.
I think we've probably covered some of these in the discussion we've just had. So this is at the Q1 performance. So as I said, this is when all internal audit activity is now moved to Stoke Council. So this covers a period up until the end of June. As it says at paragraph 1.1 there, the original plan allowed for 336 audit days. I think we did have the discussion when the plan was approved by the committee, because I think quite rightly questions were asked about whether we're going to be able to deliver the plan, which was, you know, approved in April. And I think the discussion we had at the time was that, well, we needed to have a plan in place so that we've got something to work to, but actually it was something we were going to have to be flexible at given the current situation. So as it says at the bottom of page 25 there, paragraph 2.1, unfortunately we weren't able to undertake any internal audit activity during the first quarter. You know, attending IAA, Institute of Internal Auditors meetings, you know, talking to other heads of internal audit. I don't think that's a unique position. I think quite a lot of, especially, you know, smaller districts have found that, you know, if they've only got sort of 2 or 3, you know, internal audit workers in their team that, you know, the response to the pandemic has had to take priority over normal planned internal audit work. So yeah, we find ourselves in a similar position. I think some of the reasons that I've quoted in that paragraph there are probably things that I think the chair already just mentioned around, you know, the fact that, say, internal audit staff were pulled off to do other pieces of work, the fact that auditees had to prioritise responding to the pandemic, you know, ahead of internal audit reviews. And obviously a bit more complexity for us, given that, you know, we started providing services on the 1st of April, which was during the first week of lockdown. Just to reassure the committee, though, so I understand that that might be, you know, concerning for the committee that no internal audit activity was undertaken. You know, I was still available during that period. The team were available as well to provide advice if it was needed. And we did start to undertake some preparatory work as well, so that we could commence, you know, formal activity during Q2. And we are now undertaking internal audit work, just to say as well. So the Q2 position will be a better position. What we've continued to do during Q1 as well is look at recommendations that have been implemented. So as I mentioned in the annual report, we've, you know, continued to monitor that position, and the position, you know, has improved, that position at the end of March. So Appendix 1 has got some details there about the number of recommendations that have been implemented and the number outstanding. And actually that position has improved even beyond this, which was the, you know, the end of June position. It's improved again. You know, management's had a big push on making sure that recommendations are implemented. And obviously that's the most important bit of our work. It's not us doing the review, it's actually the recommendations being implemented, the improvements being made, that's the important thing. So that is something we've been able to keep an eye on during Q1. So in paragraph 4, this probably answers Councillor Stubbs' questions about some areas of review. So what we did with the management team during Q1, because we knew that, you know, our activity was going to be reduced during the year because of the pandemic, we looked at some areas that we could look at deferring. So I think some of these actually, the ones you might have mentioned, Councillor Stubbs. So J2, I think the decision that was made by EMT was actually, it wasn't internal audit activity that was needed. You know, it was the recovery plan that was in place when it needed a full review. So I understand that's been undertaken by EMT. Procurement, we're going to be risk assessing that again for inclusion during the next financial year. That was one that was actually undertaken during 1920, so we did feel that, and it was a positive opinion, so we did feel actually that was one that we could delay for a year. The Gdpr audit, the reason that we decided that this one could be deferred was actually some consultancy work was undertaken during 1920. So it was felt that actually we needed to give that consultancy work had some areas for improvement. I understand you've recently appointed to a post to look at those areas of improvement. So we felt we needed to give that time to embed, so that before we come back and do another piece of audit work in that area. So we didn't want to duplicate what's already been done. The next two, major projects and commercial investment, again, a decision was taken that we could risk assess those again in the next financial year. Financial resilience, the reason that this one, we decided this one could potentially be deferred was that because of the work that external auditors are currently doing around this area, that we obviously don't want to duplicate the work that they're doing. So again, we'll probably risk assess this for inclusion in the 2021-22 plan. And the planning audit, we've actually decided to replace this with a different piece of work, because what's happened is we're actually reviewing the joint local plan for Stoke. So wanting to, you know, take advantage of the efficiencies of using the same internal audit team, that actually that review could look at Newcastle's side of that as well. So the planning review is actually being replaced by a joint local plan review. And as it mentions in paragraph 4.2 at the bottom there, we also decided that it was important for the elections review, which we weren't able to undertake in 1920, to fit that in and do that during 2021 as well. But as well as taking a few out, we've added another one back in. So that's all I wanted to say, really. I think so we've covered you know, the change that it's meant for the internal audit team, you know, in terms of different ways of working. But as I mentioned already, the team are embracing that. So happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. Mike first.
One for you, Paul, actually, more than Claire. I can't disagree more strongly with the J2 audit being no longer required. I think I understand that the recovery action plan to be reviewed by EMT, but I do not want officers just dealing with this. I think this needs to be open to everybody. That, you know, at the very least, whatever EMT decide, need to bring it to audit as soon as humanly possible. There's such a wide problem at Jubilee 2. It either needs to stay here with us or it needs to go to FRAPS, because the amount of money, and it's luckily so far not us spending the money, it's the developer that's going to be doing all these repairs. But at some stage, somebody needs to do a big piece of work on why that building failed so epically. And this isn't about the council. I don't believe the council's got anything to do with this, but public money was spent, a lot of public money was spent, and the building has been a unmitigated disaster. And we've lost income from that building, and we've also lost a lot of goodwill. So I suppose I'm asking you, and it might come up in, you know, what do we want to put in the forward plan? But I can't disagree any more strongly that this audit needs to be just passed back to EMT, because I think that this committee, or perhaps FRAPS, ought to be at the centre of this, because there's a lot of things that need to be discovered. And I think, you know, a member-led group, whether it be us or FRAPS, needs to do that. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that, well, I'll let Jan speak first of all. She just wants to comment on it, Mike. Go on, Jan.
Thank you, Chair. So I fully take on board what Councillor Stubbs is saying. The original intention for that audit of J2 was it was not looking at the issues around the building of J2 and the ongoing problems that we've had with the developer. And that was why it was agreed that that audit would be deferred, because it was more looking at the J2 operations and internal controls, the internal control environment for J2, and also looking at financial sustainability. I'm more than happy to go and have a discussion with EMT and Claire about whether we need to bring forward an entirely different audit project around J2, which touches more closely on the issues that Councillor Stubbs has raised. But the audit no longer being required wasn't exactly that it was no longer required, but it was more a concern about the timing of that, given, you know, the COVID impact on J2, the fact we needed to completely revisit the business plan for J2, and that reset needed to happen before internal audit went in, so that they were auditing, you know, in the right context. But as I say, I'm more than happy to you know, see whether we can accommodate something which is a bit more targeted in this year's plan around the issues about the development of the J2 building, if that helps.
Through you, Chair. I mean, that's absolutely
just
fine.
Before you speak,
yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think Jan's absolutely right with that, because it's not, the issues that we've got with J2 don't really revolve around internal audit. We've got a major issue with the building, or a number of major issues with the building, and I would have thought that what we need to do is for the EMT plan to be produced, and then I would have thought the most appropriate place for that to go would be FRAPS, so that the members can have a look at it. I think that it's more appropriate that FRAPS look at it than audit, although if anybody disagrees with me, I'm more than happy for it to come to audit. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'd have a few comments to make in relation to what's gone on, because I've been learning a few things recently, and I do think it's an absolute disgrace, some of the things that have happened there. But we as members should be put fully in the picture, and we should have an opportunity to discuss it. But I'm not overly concerned about the internal audit aspect of it at this point in time. I think we can revisit that afterwards, but I do think that either audit or FRAPS should be looking very closely in the near future at what has gone on at Jubilee 2 in relation to particularly the building and the engineering there. Is that, are you happy with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Paul. I mean, what Jan said about the fact that it's more the internal workings, that's absolutely fine. But I absolutely agree with you, and I'm very, I'm not concerned where it goes to. I think it needs to go to either us or Fraps. But I think, and we can have this conversation sitting on Fraps as well, that I think a piece of work, whether it is here, and I'm happy for the chairs to argue between themselves who wants it. I think myself and the Labour members will be pushing that it's put on somebody's forward plan, because and we all agree. So there's no point scoring here. That building has been a disaster, and we need to get to the bottom of why. And what we can do about not doing it again in the future. We're just about to build a brand new, at Kidsgrove, and actually, in their case, they will not be able to deal with problems like this because they just won't have the financial capability to do it. We're lucky that we can, but even so, it's going to take us a long time to restore the faith in that building from local paying customers. They've got 5 other choices in Newcastle alone. So I agree with you, Chair. As long as somebody picks it up at some stage, that's all I ask, really. Thank you.
And I'll pursue that with the leader of the council in any case.
Yeah. What you said, Chair, and with what Councillor Stubbs has said, members do need to be kept thoroughly up to date. I was accosted on the market this morning about the state of the J2 and the lack of services and what have you, and I think we do need to guard public money a lot more closely.
Yeah. I mean, we've been hit with a number of issues there. Obviously, COVID has massively disrupted the services, but then to add into it, we've got all the physical problems with the building and so on. So, I'll be onto the leader to make sure that this does get thoroughly investigated. Do we have any other questions in relation to this report? Sarah?
Just a very quick one for Claire. I hear you mention the B word in the previous report. You mentioned Brexit. I'm sure I heard you mention Brexit, but where does that appear in these deferred audits? Is it the procurement aspect?
No, it's not deferred at the minute. I understand that we're still going to do that piece of work, because the committee still wanted that piece of work doing, so it's still on the list to be completed during this year.
Do you know when that will be? Because they're talking about an agreement in October now, aren't they, the government?
It's not a piece of work that we've started yet, so I anticipate probably Q3. So any time now, really, we'll start that piece of work.
Okay, thank you.
Jan, would you like to just comment on that? You're muted.
Mute.
Sorry, had to press 2 buttons. So the officer group that was meeting earlier in the year, when we were potentially looking at a no-deal Brexit and they were preparing the risk assessment and contingency plans, they were stood down at the end of last year when we did reach a deal and agreed a transition period. They have now started meeting again to prepare for a no trade deal scenario, and they are currently completely revising the risk assessment and all of the contingency plans. So that is due to come back to EMT in the next week or two, and if the committee would like, I can provide an update on that as part of the Q2 risk report, which you're due to consider at your next meeting. And then if further audit work is required, clearly, things may well unfold in the next few weeks that completely change the context. But, once we have that risk profile and the plans in place to manage the risks, then we can commission that audit so that Claire has a clear brief to work to. And I think we had 5 days in the plan originally for you to look at that risk assessment and all the plans and just make sure that we've covered all the bases, Claire. So
yes,
we
that's right.
that work. So acceptable, Chair, if we proceed in that way.
I think that would be helpful, Jan, if you were to do that, and then at least in the November meeting, irrespective of how things have developed, at least we've got something in the plan so that we actually discuss it. And hopefully we'll be discussing something where we're saying, well, we've got a deal pretty much agreed, and so we're not going to fall off a cliff. But we'll have to wait and see. But either way, it's on the plan for us to discuss, and then members can look at what we want to see in terms of internal audit and review the situation as it stands then.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Are you happy with that, Mike? Yeah, okay, lovely. Right. Do we have any other questions then? No? Right, thank you very much then. If we move on then to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman annual letter, and Dan's going to just run through this for us. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so a good news item, hopefully, for you members. This report deals with the complaints received and considered by the Ombudsman for the period 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of March 2020. So there was a bit of a hiatus in the Ombudsman office when COVID kicks in, but this deals with complaints received by the Ombudsman before substantive lockdown. So still valid in terms of those impacts. And you'll see, members, that the Ombudsman dealt with 10 complaints, which is pretty good when you consider the volume of transactions the council undertakes that could give rise to complaints. And it's an improvement on the previous year, 20 complaints received by the Ombudsman over the same period in the previous year. So of those 10 complaints, members, 4 were referred back to this council for local resolution. So in short, the Ombudsman thought that those complaints had been received by the Ombudsman prematurely. The council hadn't had an opportunity to deal with them through its own processes. So that accounted for 4. And then 2 of those were closed after initial consideration, and an additional 2 considered after closed after initial consideration. And that could have been because the substance of the complaint didn't merit an investigation by the Ombudsman. It was either clear that there was nothing to deal with or no public interest in dealing with it. And that leaves 4 of the 10 complaints that were investigated by the Ombudsman. And of those 4, 1 was not upheld after investigation, and so 3 were upheld. So over that 12-month period, just 3 complaints upheld by the Ombudsman. And we can narrow it down a little bit further still, because of those 3, in one of those cases, there was no injustice found. That is to say that the council was at fault, but it didn't have any detrimental or tangible impact on the person. So they rank that as there being no injustice. And that leaves 2 remaining cases where there was fault and injustice was found. And one was in relation to robust council tax arrears collection, and the remedy there was for that to be written off, a sum of £310. And the other was in relation to a way a housing matter was handled. And again, the compensation agreed there was of a similar order, £300. And both of those amounts were dealt with and those remedies implemented. So as I say, members, I think that's a good indication of the level of service delivery over that period. And I think you can also take comfort from the fact that the council is using the Ombudsman's letter as a barometer for how it's doing and for learning from complaints that have arisen. So I'm happy to take any questions that you might have, Chair, but that's all I have by way of introduction.
Thank you. Any questions, anybody? Mike?
I was trying to let somebody else go first. My only it's a great report, actually, and to bring it down from 20 to 10, it's fantastic. It's slightly concerning that 3 were upheld. And I take Dan's point that one of them was no harm. What the only thing that really concerns me, and Dan sort of made a point of this as pre-COVID, is that one of the complaints was for being sort of overzealous in the collection of outstanding council tax. Have the lessons been learned? Because I would suspect that those council tax arrears have only gone up across the borough over the last, and I know from FRAP that they haven't gone up that much, but have the lessons been learned via our sort of bailiff collection that we need to be a little bit more aware of the current situation? Thanks, Chair.
Through you, Chair, and Jan might want to come in on this because it's ultimately her area of responsibility. But from my recollection of the decision matter, and I did look into this when it was received, it was a case of us pursuing an aged debt where we probably ought to have taken steps sooner or had to think about whether we should have been pursuing it after such an amount of time. So it's, I don't think it's overzealous in any worrying sense in the context that Councillor Stubbs raises, but those lessons have been taken on board from that particular case.
Thank you. I haven't got Jan asking to speak, so I'll assume that she's happy with your response on that. I mean, it is a good report. It's very good that we get very, very few complaints, and hopefully, it'll continue like that. So thanks to everybody who's involved in that. And obviously, if there were a situation, then I'd be grateful if you bring it to this committee's attention if we do see that there's any rise in complaints or anything. But I mean, assuming that nothing untoward happens, then we'll be happy to wait until we get the next annual report, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions in relation to this? No. Right, okay. Thanks, Dan. We'll move on to item number 7 then, which is the COVID-19 update. I assume Jan's going to run through this for us, being as we don't have the Chief Executive.
Yes, I am, Chair. So what you have in front of you is the latest COVID update report that was presented to Cabinet in September. It has already been considered at FAPS, but since you asked for this to be on your agenda at every meeting so that you can monitor developments from an audit and standards perspective, you have the report in front of you. I won't take you through the report because I think members are probably well conversant with the contents already, but I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Now, I've read through, I've got no questions on it, and I don't believe anybody else has. So if we're happy to take that as read, and we have no comments to send on to Cabinet. So, okay, item 8 then, the committee work plan. Does anybody have any comments in relation to this? I think it